You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello everybody, apologies for being a couple of minutes late. Just had a few technical difficulties in the studio. In fact, I went to go and the whole thing just crashed on me. So I apologise for that. But I'm here now and I'm getting ready to play out tonight's interview for you with the wonderful Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard himself, he of Haunted Hospitals fame and all that wonderful stuff. But before then, I hope everyone's well. I hope everyone's been enjoying themselves. And I'm off this weekend investigating. Yay! It feels like I haven't been for ages. I'm going with the lovely people from the Paranormal Sisters. Yeah, we're going over to a place called Bodmin Mill near Bedford, and I'd love for you to be able to join us, but unfortunately it's sold out. It's sold out, even though people know I'm going. It's a shocker, isn't it? But I will let you know what that's like. Now, has everyone read Kerry's new blog that's on the website? If you haven't, head over there now. It's a bloody good piece of writing. But on that note, I think I'm going to play out the actual interview from Richard. On this week's Haunted History, I've got... He's so handsome, he's so tall, he's so masculine. He's also a cheeky little sod who has just done his own intro for us and then told me how to pronounce his name. And the fact I've known this dude for 2 years and he's only now just told me how to pronounce his name. It is the one, the only, on Haunted Histories, talking about Bodmin Jail and our recent visit there and the book he's writing, Mr. Richard Estep. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Penny. Actually, it's Estep.
Oh, don't you start. Don't you start. I am so going to punch you when I next see you. I might need to stand on a block to do it, but oh my god, it's happening. How are you? So what would you rather, Estep or Estep? Which do you want?
Either one. Let's go with Estep because that's more common. That's like the way it should be pronounced. Just so many people say Estep, I've given up arguing.
2 years I've known you, mate, and that's the first time you've said it.
I know, right? And now, I don't know what order you're going to be playing these in, but I know the last Haunted Histories I listened to, you had the nicest Richard in the universe, Richard from Pengana.
Oh, yes.
On the show.
Yes, he is definitely the nicest Richard in the world. Yeah.
He is. My wife has told him this. She wants to kidnap him and have him come be our interior designer because he's so talented.
I just want to kidnap him and talk history, because... Yeah, but I did actually discover something about his family that he didn't know.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he never put two and two together how old his great-great-grandmother was when she had his great-great-grandfather. And I worked out she would have been, I worked out she would have been late 30s, early 40s when she had him. And obviously back in the day, that was quite old to have children. And he'd never put that together. It was only I found it when I was looking at the census records. So, even someone who's well researched as him, I can come along and find a little tidbit that you didn't know. I like to help. I like to help people.
I've noticed that.
Yeah. Well, I try. It doesn't always work. But what have you been up to anyway, Mr. Estep?
It's been since I got back from the UK, so we had fun times at Bodmin Jail, you and I and a whole bunch of other people. We went on the hunt for Aleister Crowley's, is it Crowley or Crowley, talking about pronouncing names. Do you know?
I say Crowley.
I say Crowley as well.
Crowley, yeah.
Mr.
Crowley. Yeah, well, Ozzy Osbourne said exactly. Mr. Crowley, so let's go with that.
We found Crowley's, thanks to the help of Jem, a very nice guide of ours. we went to Crowley's abandoned cottage up in the middle of nowhere near Zennor in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Had some interesting experiences there, and then came back across the pond. And just at the beginning of this week, I was investigating the Teller House in Central City, Colorado. I've always wanted to write a kind of Wild West style history paranormal book.
Yeah.
And that entire town, this kind of mining town with incredible history, I was invited to go investigate a number of the buildings there. That'll be an ongoing project. It will take 3 years to even scratch the surface of that town.
Oh, wow. It looked amazing, the photos you put of that building. And I think I said to you, it's very sort of Wild West looking. So
it is.
Yeah.
It's all casinos now and that kind of thing. So, and it's right outside Denver. It's in the middle of nowhere up in the mountains, my kind of place.
So it's not a million miles from you either?
No, it's definitely drivable, but it's enough that you have to go out of your way to get there.
Right. No, it did look it was straight out of an episode of Bonanza.
Yeah, absolutely.
And didn't you say that had links to Ulysses Grant? Was it Ulysses?
So yeah, there's a myth out there. I know you like debunking your historic myth. I mean, so it's said that President Ulysses S. Grant spent the night at the Teller House. He actually didn't. He ate dinner there though, and they have the room in which he ate dinner is known as the Grant Room, which is cool. He's one of my favorite U.S. historical characters. And if anyone wants to learn more about him, Ron Chernow wrote a great biography of Grant that came out a couple of years ago. Highly recommended.
Well, with a name like Ulysses, it's just he had to be a president, didn't he? Really?
Well, U.S. Grant. He was Ulysses S. Grant, so he was U.S. Grant.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that.
The soldiers said it stood for unconditional surrender because that's what he demanded at the South. So, but also Uncle Sam, U.S. That's kind of prophetic, I think.
It is, isn't it? I never thought of it like that. So where else have you been? What else have you been up to?
So that's been it so far. I'm gearing up for more adventures this year. I'm going to the Monroe House in Indiana. Which, if your listeners are familiar with that, it's probably from the show Paranormal Lockdown. It's a house with a very dark haunting, or so the stories go. We'll find out when I move in for 4 days. Small team, but certainly that's what Katrina Weidman, when I was chatting with her, she insists it's a very negative place, very dark haunting.
Oh, get those name drops in, Rich. Get the name drops in.
It's not so much the fact that she's famous as the fact that she's lived there for 3 days.
There is that, yeah.
Locked down for 3 days inside. So, she was sharing some stories with me about her theories of that particular haunting and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. It's nice when somebody's done a lot of the legwork for you, isn't it?
Yes.
Before you go into a location and they're willing to share.
Yes. Yeah, they can do the legwork, but it's whether they'll actually share the information with you or whether they're like, no, you go and find out yourself. And you're like, oh, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice when that happens. Like a big shout out to Mike Cavell, for example, over there in England, in Hull. He's a guy that is fantastic for digging into archives of haunted places, and then is willing to share that information. I don't think Mike gets enough credit. I said that in print, but I wanted to actually say it verbally too.
Oh, he is getting better at saying no to people who just use and abuse what he does. He's starting to realise the value in the work, because there was a conversation him and I had quite recently as well. But I have no problem sharing information as long as I get acknowledged for sharing it. One of my bugbears is when someone cites a fact that I found and then makes out that they found it, and it's like, okay, well, where did you find it then? Oh, some newspaper. Which newspaper?
Yeah.
Oh, one of the London ones. What date?
Cite your sources.
Yeah. Because even I will cite it's a newspaper I found it in, and the newspaper and the date and everything else. But hey, I was the one that trawled through 17 pages of newspaper articles to find that piece of information. So,
but yeah, you would have liked Central City for sure. And the historical research for that's going to take a lot of time. It's a great deal of fun to delve into the town's history. You know who else had a house in town, which I'm getting to investigate? This is really cool. Mae West. Mae West. There is a Mae West house in Central City, yeah.
It's not the men in my life. It's the life in my men.
Right.
That's one of my
which,
favourite quotes by her.
She was remarkably eloquent for a life preserver, wasn't she?
Yes, she was remarkable for a life jacket. Yeah.
And talking about the most tenuous link ever.
Go on.
To go from Mae West to Fred West.
Oh, wow.
Because I
for that segue.
Yeah. I'm going a little bit mainstream. I've been asked to write a book about serial killers by a publisher.
Yes, you have.
Which, no ghosts, no paranormal. So I'm delving into my browser history should probably get me put on a federal watch list at this point. Doing the research for that and pulling some excellent books on serial killers. But now that the Fox Hollow book is in and done, and I think we're going to talk about that on your show later this year, aren't we?
We are going to definitely be talking about that one later this year, Richard.
The I-70 Strangler. But I'll be doing a paranormal serial killer book on the John Wayne Gacy haunting. That is something I investigate later this summer.
Oh, that's another one I'll be looking forward to talking about when you start writing on that one, because he is one who gives me the creeps. It's that clown thing. It's the clown thing about him, and
yeah. So it's a pretty full docket at the moment. It's going to be a busy year.
You do sound busy, and you're jetting off to Canada again
tomorrow morning. Yeah, I shot for the first part of season 2 of Haunted Hospitals. I want to say about 6-8 weeks ago, and they're asking me to come be the expert for the second block as well. So I fly out to Toronto tomorrow morning to go shoot that. And
how long are you out there for?
Just a couple of days.
Okay.
Most of the time on that show, they spend shooting the recreations, the actual kind of dramatization stuff. I like to think of it as Crime Watch with ghosts.
That's one way
for those
of
of
putting
us that are old.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, obviously, I did know about your serial killer book because we talked about it when we were in Bodmin together, and I gave you a few ideas, and you sort of poo-pooed them, Richard.
I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying it's such a broad range of stuff. It's the tough part is picking which ones you're going to include, because there are some, like for example, Ted Bundy. You can't write about serial killers and not write something about Ted Bundy. But so much has been, pardon my phrase, done to death.
Yes.
That finding something new to say, and one thing it shouldn't be shocking at all, really, but one thing that has really opened my eyes is if you look at China and Russia. We don't hear as much about them in the West, but there are Chinese, Russian, and I'm sure most other nations all have their own serial killers.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So some of the more obscure ones have been fascinating to research, and I'm glad that I have a year to research and write that book.
Yeah, you definitely need it if you're going worldwide on these kind of things, because as you say, I mean, some of the ones. Well, I don't know if you have it on Netflix in the US, but there was a program on. It's like World's Scariest Prisons, and one of the prisons the guy went into, and he had to live there for I think it's a week or something. I don't know how many it's Russian or Ukrainian. It's that former USSR anyway.
Yeah.
And he was talking to a serial killer, and this serial killer married a girl who was like 40 years his junior, and they still have conjugal visits, and they get to cook together, and so he's got knives. And
what are they cooking?
Well, exactly, and there does seem to be an awful lot that when you do start digging into it. Although one of the ones that intrigues me, I must admit, and I did a show on it with I can't remember how we got onto the subject. It was the Cleveland Torso Killer. That one was an interesting one, because that's almost like a Jack the Ripper type thing that nobody knows who it was.
Yeah.
And that one was I found that one quite interesting to look into.
So the other thing that's kind of interested me about people in general, since I put the word out that I'm writing this book, it seems like everybody I know, and you were, I think, the first, Penny, but there have been many others since. That sounded less bad in my head. But it seems like everybody has their top 10 serial killers these days. It's got to be a media cultural thing. But people are like, so you're going to write about Harold Shipman, right? Who I think holds the world record. People have said, oh, so you're going to write about Bundy, you're going to write about Gacy, you're going to write about the Yorkshire, and so on and so forth. Before you know it, though, it's amazing how prevalent they are in our consciousness, the national consciousness. You know, it's something that you kind of can't escape anymore. And I do wonder if that isn't feeding into why we see so many more of them these days.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I mean, this is, again, it's going to sound wrong. I've probably been into the whole sort of psychology of serial killers and everything since I was in my late teens. And I do remember when I moved out of home at 18, pretty good 60-70% of books I owned that were non-fiction were to do with serial killers and various serial killers and why they did what they did, or so why the psychologists think they did what they did. And it wasn't so much the guts and the gore of it that fascinated me. It was, could I spot a similarity in, this is before I knew about like FBI, BAU and all that stuff. Could I spot a similarity in their upbringings? Could I spot a similarity in what triggered them to start? Could I spot the similarity in why they were doing what they were doing? And that's what's always interested me about it. And so looking at the ones that haven't been so heavily PR'd, if you like. So, I mean, someone like Ted Bundy, I'm actually looking forward to the new film with Zac Efron coming out with him, because I'm quite interested to see how Zac Efron plays him. But his case, I don't really read up much on now, because, like you say, it's been done to death. Whereas some of the ones that are less well known, I mean, the one I mentioned to you, the child killer Amelia Dyer from the Victorian era, things like that, I find quite sort of interesting and looking at the difference between a female killer and a male killer, and looking at the difference between a spree killer and a serial killer. That's where I find it very interesting. And I say, not looking so much.
They blur the boundaries, don't they, too? Some of them straddle categories.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not so much looking at, you know, the gory photos and, I say, the guts and the gore. It's looking at the similarities. It's looking at their MOs. It's looking at what could have triggered them to do that. And do all serial killers start by killing their neighbour's rabbit before they start killing humans? Do you know what I mean? And can you spot it in childhood that they may have that psychopathic tendency? And then getting so far that an old friend of mine, he was a neuropsychologist, and he said they were developing MRI machines to see if people who had certain predispositions towards certain types of crime, so whether that's serial rape, serial killing, child abuse, whatever it was, does their brain pattern all function the same way? Can you spot it in a brain pattern?
And you know what becomes even more interesting to my mind is, and I know we're supposed to be talking about Bodmin.
It's kind of leading on to it, because Bodmin's a jail, and these people would have been there.
Right.
Yeah.
But then what fascinates me is, what can you do with that information?
That's exactly the point. Yeah.
Can you hold it against anybody for being born with the wiring that they are? You know, you'd have to watch them pretty closely, but can you do anything with it?
Yeah, it's the whole nature versus nurture, isn't it? Is it nature, or is it nurture, or is it a combination of the two? Because and this was actually,
you can't penalise someone for what they might do.
No. I mean, but this is a conversation. Interesting enough, that one of the people who came to Bodmin with us, the lovely Wes Coleman of Cops, and him and I were talking about this.
Wes.
I love Wes. I do love Wes.
Wes is along with me for the Gacy investigation, by the way.
Oh, is he? Oh, brilliant.
I feel like it's nice to have a big, you know, hairy-ass prison guard with you in those kind of cases. I just don't know where I'm going to get a clown suit to fit him.
I'm sure you'll find one. Somewhere. But
yeah, I sent a new Facebook profile picture in the offing for Wes.
Oh, it's got to be. Especially if he's got the cigar as well. He's got to have the cigar in the clown suit.
Yeah, sure.
But him and I were having this conversation about, so what, are they going to lock people up at 3 years old because their brainwaves are denoting they might be psychopathic, or are they going to try and medicate them to dumb down that brainwave that might lead them to kill? Or but it's a fascinating sort of, you know, it's almost like gene testing for certain illnesses. But I that's what I find fascinating about the whole serial killer thing is the psyche behind it. It's like can you spot the similarities and why they do what they do, and and like I say, that's obviously what the BAU and the FBI does, but I didn't know about that at the time when I started reading up on it, and everyone used to think I was weird, but as my ex said once, you've either got books on witchcraft, books on serial killers, yeah, that's pretty much it, books on witchcraft and books on, if someone ever broke into our house, they'd go hightailing it out of there because they'd be terrified.
And I'm getting fascinated by the links between the paranormal and serial killers. So I think writing about Fox Hollow Farm, which again we won't go into because we're going to do a show on that, but that was my first real encounter that involved both aspects, a serial killer and a haunting. And then as I start to look beneath the surface, you find that there are several cases which mirror that.
Yep.
There seems to be something about those kind of crimes.
Yep, definitely. So. I mean, you've got like Sam Berkowitz, Son of Sam, David Berkowitz. That's got a paranormal link, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So it's not unusual, I don't think, to have that kind of link. But yes, but talking about crime, that kind of gets us into punishment. Yeah, Bodmin Jail. Now you came in March. The weather was sodden atrocious. I think I went to every single weather front. Pardon?
Not for Britain.
No, seriously, I think I drove through every single type of weather front on my way from Essex to Cornwall that day, on the Saturday. I think I had every single type of weather thrown at me. And this is what I was telling the lovely Richard last week, that when I was normally when I'm doing a long drive, I'll only, on the motorway, I'll have one hand on the steering wheel and the other one resting in my lap. It was so windy and unpredictably windy the whole drive down. I had to have both hands on my steering wheel the whole time, because every so often the wind was just hitting my car and almost sending me across. And then we had the torrential rain that was literally... it was amazing to sit in my hotel room and watching the different weather conditions come in and out.
Yeah, but ghost stories happen on a dark and stormy night, right?
Exactly. And I was thinking, I was talking to my husband on the Saturday night before I came over to the inn to see you guys, and I was actually saying this should bode well. Dark and stormy, and it didn't really disappoint, did it? So
no.
We had a varied crew. I mean, this was your second visit to Bodmin, wasn't it? To do?
Yeah, it was. I'd investigated the year before, and I'd felt very strongly that there was so much more I wanted to uncover. I don't think you can do a location that historic, that expansive. I don't think you could, that haunted. I don't think you can do it justice by visiting for 48 hours. We did 2 nights there. So I'd wanted to do more, and I'll be back again next year also.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, do we know when the hotel's due to open that they're building there?
So I'd heard 2020, but I do believe the date shifted.
Right.
So it will be either sometime next year or the year after, I feel certain. They're making very, very solid progress with it from what I can see. And that's one of the things that's fascinated me, is your listeners, because this is Haunted History, will know, there is a strong correlation between construction or destruction activity in the building and paranormal activity.
Yeah.
Spirits don't seem to like it when you start tearing up their environment.
Yes. Yeah. No,
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Sorry, what were you going to say? I was agreeing with you.
The year before, on our first visit, one thing that we weren't able to do this year, the naval wing, which was always the hardest hit at Bodmin. It was the most ruined, probably because they've had an explosion in there a while back as well. There was a deliberate explosion took place in the naval wing.
Yes.
It's the part that looks the most picturesque and the most ruined and abandoned. That's where they're doing a lot of the construction to turn that into a hotel. And so nobody, even the staff, are not allowed back there right now. It wasn't somewhere we could investigate. But last year, we were able to do so by a tremendous stroke of luck. I'll tell the story, the short version, Penny. I don't know if I've talked to you about this already, but I had a very small team with me. We were investigating in the jail. And I saw that 2 of the employees were chatting with a very well-dressed chap who turned out to be one of the, I guess I would say, head honchos for the construction project, working on behalf of the owners. And very nice guy. And he said, who's this fellow and what's he doing with all of these gadgets? And they said, this is Richard. He's investigating the jail. He's writing a book about the haunted history. And he said, have you taken him to the naval wing? Because that's the part that spoke to me when I first came here, which was an interesting thing for someone to say who is essentially a businessman. He said that this wing spoke to him personally, almost not literally, but he felt very strongly that there needed to be some preservation of that part of the jail.
Yeah.
And the staff, Kirsten and Mark, said, we're told we can't go back there, can't take anyone back there, and it was pouring down with rain, and the guy said, you know what, we'll fix that. You follow me. And he pulls out this master set of keys. And we go out in the middle of a rainstorm to a place with no roof. It's open to the elements. So we dashed out there through these puddles of mud. And he's in a sharply dressed tailored suit, mud splattered all over it. I'm dressed as, I have one dress code, right, Penny?
Yeah, you do have a dress code, yeah.
It's basically low-rent Josh Gates. And we go out into the naval wing, and he led us out there, and he said, well, I'm going indoors, but you guys spend as much time as you want out here. So we did some EVP sessions, and it was a really incredible experience. This is the places where World War I German prisoners and British Royal Naval prisoners were held for extensive periods of time. And I was really sad that we couldn't get back out there again this trip. Because next time we see it, it will be a hotel.
Well, talking about that naval wing, I did tell you what happened to me when I was there with, I think it was Stephen, Jill, and Sharon, using Stephen's voice generator. Did I tell you what happened?
I don't recall hearing it.
Ah, okay. Well, I know I talk about my children quite a lot. My eldest one is very interested in history and investigating, and he always asks me what's happened on an investigation, tell him, so he can ask me loads of questions and all that kind of thing. There is a reason I'm saying that. Anyway, so we're sitting there on that floor, right by the entrance to the naval wing, where it says naval wing, where they're doing all the generation and stuff. I can't remember what floor that would have been, second floor possibly, and I could hear what sounded like French coming through on Stephen's voice generator box.
And the year before we had German.
Okay, well this was definitely French, and so just as a sort of example, I just went, oh, bonjour, vous parlez français. And what came back very audibly, and everyone heard it, was oui.
Oh, very cool.
And I asked a couple of other questions. I think I asked in French, do you speak English? And it came back as a yes. And then I can't remember now what I asked. I think somebody recorded it on a voice recorder. But it was answering me in French. And it did say something very gabbled in French. And I wasn't recording it at the time because we were kind of at the end of a session. We were almost, and you're just almost playing because you're just thinking, what should we do next? And so I don't know what else it said, but it said something quite garbled. It sounded in French anyway, so I sort of said, merci, au revoir, to say goodbye. Anyway, that was quite interesting that it answered oui when I said, do you speak French? And I was talking to my son the next day, and he was like, first proud moment, the first thing he said to me is, Mummy, was it very active? Not Mummy with a ghost, Mummy, was it active? This is a 9-year-old, so brownie points the fact he said, is it active? And then yeah, exactly, he's learning, he's very good. And he would be able to pick a K2 out of a lineup as well. He's getting there. But he said, can you tell me about something? And I told him about this spirit speaking French to me on a voice gen, and he turned round and his actual words were, well, Mummy, that could have been one of the Napoleonic prisoners, couldn't it?
Oh, that's right, you did tell me this story. Yeah, that is a proud parent moment.
Yeah, and I was like, how do you, you've never learnt about the Napoleonic Wars. I don't know whether he read it, I don't know whether he saw it on Horrible Histories or something like that. I have no idea where he found that piece of it. But yes, it was a very proud Mummy moment. But it was also the fact it answered me in French. But I was so stunned I couldn't think of anything in French to ask it. My mind went blank. But yeah, it was answering me in French, right by where the naval wing is, which I thought was quite an interesting experience to have.
It is. It is fascinating, and we got most of our German voices. We got some in the naval wing, but we also got some in the hanging pit outside. And one thing I found fascinating about that is you'll hear an explanation for the voices you get on spirit boxes as well. You're picking up radio stations.
Yeah.
And it's one thing when you pick up. I can see that argument when you are scanning through English radio station frequencies, of course. But it's a little harder to explain when you get voices in foreign languages.
Yes. And that intelligently answer you. as well.
Yes,
I mean, that was the thing about this one. It was the fact that we all heard when I said in French, "Do you speak French?" Oui. It was an answer. Now, if that was just a radio station, the chance of it answering "oui" at the right time, probability-wise, ain't that high.
Yeah, it stretches, and I've said this before, but it stretches your willingness to believe in coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was quite an interesting one there. The fact that they're, prisoners of different nationalities are might still be there. So that was your first visit. Who went with you on your first? Who was there? Was anyone?
It was a fairly small group that first year. So it was myself. It was Stephen, who is, I think I've talked about him before, but he is a Catholic priest. And paranormal investigator by equal measure.
Yes.
So, and Leslie and Gaynor, my two English colleagues. So it was a fairly small group the first year, which was ideal for minimizing noise pollution.
Yeah. That is one of the things I noticed when we had the slightly larger group there, that the noise really does travel now through the prison. And I don't remember it travelling like that before when I visited there sort of 5-6 years ago. It seems to be something's been opened up there, like within the building with the work that they're doing, that used to damp down the noise.
The acoustics have changed, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think with some of the exhibits that have been moved around, it has changed the acoustics. Because I genuinely don't remember that when I was there as a tourist 5 years ago.
The biggest mistake I made this year, hands down, was I took too many people. I took a team this year of about 10.
Yeah.
And when you have, my thought of it was, it's an old building, it's stone, it's very sturdy construction. You would think the sound wouldn't travel that far, but thanks to the fact that you do have these passageways for air to flow through, and you do have ducts and chimneys, those kind of things, a lot of our audio data was contaminated this second time around, partly because of poor noise discipline on the part of some of the groups, but primarily because sound travels in strange ways in that building. So
it does. Yeah.
My big lesson learned was next year when I go back, I'm just going to go back to a handful of investigators again and working as a group.
Yeah. I mean, the thing was, even sitting in the base room, which is sort of on the almost sub-basement level, isn't it, where all the cameras were, it was fascinating to watch those cameras and seeing what was coming up on them and seeing people's reactions to things and watching them. I could still hear people on the other floors in that room. And when you look at as you say, you look at the size of the walls were a good foot wide, aren't they? Of stone.
They are.
A pure stone. We're not talking plasterboard or anything here. We're talking thick stone. Yeah, I could still hear people moving around down there, and it wasn't paranormal because then I could look at the camera and I could see where people were and why. So, yeah, that was something that I would have. It was getting very, very hard to keep. And even best will in the world, even if you were sitting quietly and someone was 2 floors up, talking very quietly to sort of try and have a conversation with the spirit, as you do when you call out, you could still pick it up 2 floors down.
You could, and that's not to say we didn't get activity. I mean, one of the more interesting occurrences was, we heard very clear, distinct, and we recorded these footsteps pacing back and forth above our head, which, when you look at the floor plan of the jail, was in the locked, it's generally the restaurant and social center.
Yeah.
We recorded that on a number of occasions, too loud to be anything other than a series of footsteps. So, that's fascinating, but in terms of voices, a lot of it has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Well, there was one interesting experience that I had when I was sitting in the break room with one of Stephen's friends, who was there, who was, we were chatting about stuff, and I was. But what was interesting, she kept saying that I'm sure there's a young man in the corner. He's been watching us and all of this, and this is one of the things I've always said to people, that people always forget to investigate the break room on these places. And sometimes they're quite active. I quite like being left on my own with them, and I do it quite frequently. I'll say to people, leave me on my own in the break room. I'm going to run a few experiments in here and see what I can find. But what was interesting is we were having a conversation to see and inviting him in to join in with us. And quite soon after we started talking, we played back the digital recorder, and you can hear a male voice very audibly behind us go, "Shh," on the recorder.
That's really amazing, isn't it? I like, again, it speaks to that interactivity that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's something entirely different. Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to say a number of times during that night. But yeah, the jails... Go ahead.
Sorry, I think it's just one though. I think it was it would have been very hard with the amount of people we had to have kept it silent, because you would have had to all been in one group at all times together, and there was too many people to do that. And as you say, you would have thought with a building that size, with stone walls that are over a foot thick of pure stone, you should have been able to have two groups running without them contaminating each other. I think the only way to have done that would have been to have one group outside doing like the yard and the hanging pit and all around there, and have a group in the prison at the same time. But you'd have still had to have reasonable size, sort of 4 or 5 people in each group doing that. But
yeah, it was definitely a lesson learned for me that just because it looks big and robust, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to step on each other in some ways. Yeah.
Well, I mentioned outside, and this was quite an interesting one, the hanging pit. Because one of the misnomers people have about Bodmin, and this got mentioned when I was talking to the lovely Richard about Pengana, is that people think that all the hangings happened within the prison gates over the years, but they didn't. Only 4 hangings actually happened within the prison gates the time it was opened. Most hangings...
Yeah, right, and a couple of them were thrown out of doorways upstairs.
Yes, they were. Well, Selina Wadge and William Bartlett were the ones who were literally thrown out of a doorway, and that was quite an interesting, because I never knew that. Until it was only when I was lucky enough to be there with you guys that I found that out. And it was strange, because I know Kirsten said I was sitting by that doorway, Richard, and I felt very sad. And Kirsten said to me, "What's the matter?" And I said, "At this doorway, there's something, I don't like it." And she just smiled. She goes, "That's where William and Selina were hung from." Yeah.
And it's very close to the navel wing, isn't it?
Very.
So you have, it's fair to say, post-naval depression.
Oh, God. Yes. All right. Very good. Oh,
but in all seriousness, though, the hanging pit itself, and I don't know if you want to talk about what we did there.
It's up to you, mate. It's your book.
I'm more than happy to talk about anything. But we had our own. It was Gaynor, I believe, that had said, "What must it have been like to know?"
Yeah, it was.
That you were going to be hanged. You know, what must it have been like to make that last walk to the hanging pit? And so we decided to give her a taste of that.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Yes. So basically, Gaynor was led down the front. She was taken to the front. She was stood at the front steps of the prison. She had, I think, she had the mask on her face at that point, didn't she? You covered her. Yeah. Or did you cover the face when we got into the pit area? I can't remember now.
We covered her face. I'm pretty sure when we got into the pit, because that's when the hood would have been put on the condemned.
Yes, and so she was walked across the front yard, the pathway that the condemned prisoner would have walked. And we do have to thank Kirsten Honey for sort of her amazing narrative of going through this. Was so informed. It was
and chilling also.
Yes, yeah, very chilling. And walked to the pit and then prepared and the various things. And I think it was you and Wes who were the guard and the executioner, wasn't it?
That's right.
And Gaynor did say she felt fear. Even though she knew it wasn't really going to happen, she felt fear, didn't she?
Well, I think just to walk in the footsteps of someone who made that their last walk. And not to bring this back again to Fox Hollow, but when you walk down the staircase at Fox Hollow and you know that at least 17 young men went down those same steps and never came back up.
Yeah.
It's a very sobering, if you're the kind of person that feels the import of events like that, it does hit you. And so for Gaynor, you know, people were walked the same path with guards on either side. They could see the noose, they could see the scaffold, they could see, you know, they knew that that they would breathe their last in about 10 minutes' time, what must that have felt like deep down in your bones? The sense of anticipation must have been horrific.
But do you know what word came up on my ovilus as you guys were doing that march?
What?
Footsteps.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, footsteps. That was quite... Yeah, well, I've gone back and reviewed the evidence. That was the word that came up, footsteps, as you guys were walking her across. But I also saw a light anomaly in the corner of that room as you were doing all that. I don't know if you remember that. That just after you'd finished, I saw a bright light in the corner of the room, and nobody had taken any flash photography. No, you guys were all facing me. Because I was taking the photos of it, if you remember, and everyone else was kind of facing me, because I think some of the others had gone back off into the inside to do some stuff inside.
Yeah.
And I saw a light anomaly in the corner literally seconds after you'd gone through the mock execution. That wasn't a flash photography. There was no torches, there was no cars coming past, nothing. But that hanging pit area was very I found it more sobering, or more sobering. I don't know if that's the right
melancholy,
word.
perhaps?
Yeah, that's probably a better word. I found it more melancholy in the actual above ground bit than actually in the pit itself, because we got to go down into the pit, didn't we, to see what it would have been like looking up. Because
we did, and there's something that I haven't had a chance to talk to you about yet, Penny, that's interesting.
Go on.
Because you weren't with us at the end of that night.
No, I left a bit early.
You had to leave early. You had to drive, but I remember not thinking about anything in particular when we were doing the staged execution. I remember, just focusing on not falling into that pit, actually. And then we went down into the pit, because it's quite a fall, isn't it?
It's a long way. You'd probably
get hurt.
You'd need an ambulance driver, put it that way, if you fell down into it. And I'm saying that, why I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Yeah, you would need paramedics to help you out.
For Britain's paramedics, I will send you Penny's address later. You can flag that for special services. And I'm sure the fire engine drivers and police car drivers would agree.
Oh yeah.
But so anyway, long story short with this, Kirsten said to Wes and I at the end, she said, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but both of you, the pair of you, your affect changed when you came out of that pit. That your mood seemed to change. You seemed to act differently, more on edge, more out of character. And I haven't really had a chance to talk to anybody other than Wes, because we weren't that aware of it. But she said that she sensed kind of a change in both of us once we emerged from that execution pit, that we were a little edgier, we were a little snappier, not in a good way. And I do think some of that on my part might have been an irritation at the noise pollution, the fact that it was too noisy a location to get good results in. But yeah. I kind of wonder, too, if she's not right, if she might not have a point.
I'll be honest, I don't know if... You see, I thought yours was just because you were getting annoyed with the noise. Because your persona did change that night from what I'd seen the night before. But I just thought it was due to the noise, and that I don't know.
And that was definitely an element of it.
I mean, Wes went a lot more serious after that. We did the hanging thing. I did notice that as well, but I just wondered if it had affected him in a kind of... Because the thing is about Wes that I discovered spending that long weekend with you guys is he might look like a big, rough, tufty Canadian, but he's actually quite a softie.
He is. You imagine Wes, for those that don't know him, for your listeners, so he's this big Canadian prison guard, paranormal investigator kind of guy. And, you would imagine that he would... I don't know how I would imagine Wes would be off duty, if I didn't know him. I mean, people are surprised to hear that he likes nothing better than to go home and have a nice cup of tea and watch Richard Felix ghost videos. That's his great passion.
And cuddling his dog, yeah.
And cuddling his dog, absolutely, and being a parent and stuff like that. But he's a very serious guy when he's got his working face on. Very professional. He's exactly the kind of guy you want in your corner when you're in this kind of location.
Oh, definitely. And he's very protective as well. I know that's what he was saying to me about one of the the experience I had with the spirit board, that he was worried about me. He was being very, very protective. But he is also very sensitive and quite, I say, a bit of a big old softie. Actually, as are you, Richard. As are you. You're a bit of a big old softie as well.
Not remote true. Not true at all.
Ha ha.
But I would say also, Penny, that not to sound too mercenary, I was aware of this dynamic. I would work with Wes on any case, and I'm happy working with him this year later on. But having someone with his qualifications, his background, the prison officer, in a jail, I do think that might have altered the dynamic a little bit during our investigation, and it may be, Kirsten had mentioned this too, that there was a little bit of intimidation on the part of whatever spirits were resident there, because you're bringing in someone who's a corrections officer, and they have a certain vibe, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. Well, he definitely has a, he's almost got that, he always had 360 vision. Does that make sense? He was constantly aware of what was going on around him, like a prison officer would have to be, because they have to, you never know when things are going to take a turn for the worse. And you've got to be ready to jump in. And it was very interesting. I mean, Gaynor and I probably didn't tell you about the time he scared us, though, at the prison.
Oh, did you look at his browser history?
We were actually in that main corridor that would have been the main entrance corridor where the toilets lead off, and where that partition is. That I'll talk about what happened to me at that partition in a second. But Gaynor and I had been, I think we'd been doing some EVPs in the loos or something strange like that, because Kirsten has said the ladies' toilets are quite, or the toilets in general are quite active. We didn't go into the men's loos. We only did.
And you went in pairs, huh?
Yeah, of course.
Nice to keep stereotypes going.
Well, I think I'd said I'd go in there on my own, and Gaynor goes, "I'm not staying out here. I'm coming in with you." So it was something, or vice versa. I can't remember which of us it was that said that. Anyway, we came out and we said, "Let's find Wes." And he goes, "I'm here." And we're looking around going, "Where are you?" "I'm here." And it was like this disembodied voice was all around us. And he's like, "Where are you?" "I'm here." "Where's here?" And we just couldn't see him. And he just put the torch on under his chin, typical sort of haunted story thing. "I'm here." And with his sort of like grin that he does, I do remember Gaynor and I both went, "Wah!" Because it was one of those. And he just chuckled. But he was basically sitting in a chair in the corner of that darkened corridor.
Right.
We couldn't see him. But the way the acoustics worked in that area, the voice just carried. It was all around us. And we were both literally, like, almost back to back, spinning round, going, "Where is he? Where is he?" Because we couldn't see him. There were moments of amusement.
Yeah, he does switch that. But I spent some time in cells with him, and I've actually been locked up by Wes before in Cripple Creek. We were his, he brought a team of prison guards who were paranormal investigators with him. A shout out to COPS, actually, the
great guys,
the Canadian Correctional Officers Paranormal Society. Great bunch of lads. I'd work with them anytime. Yeah. And once those wonderful chaps to hang out with, have a pint with and socialize with, but when they're in prison officer mode, which is what we asked for them, we asked of them. They like flip a switch and they're working. And it's true with most professionals in the high stress professions, and I think he brought some of that with him. As he's walking through the jail, he kind of has, I won't say strut because that conjures up the wrong image, but even his gait, his way of walking, it indicates, it signals, hey, I own this place.
It's a more purposeful ownership type.
Yeah, it's a stride.
Yeah.
I think having that energy in the building helped us immensely in some ways, and I think it might have dampened things in others.
Yeah, no, it was. I enjoyed working with him. The bits I got to work with him out, let's say in that corridor. But it was one of the points when everyone had decided to go and have a break. I decided to go walkabout, because then I thought maybe there was areas I could sit on my own and do some silent, like lone vigil type things. And I was sitting outside where the I think it was the death row cells would have been, and and I was asking some questions, sort of like, what was it like, quite quiet questions, because I didn't know if there was anyone else still upstairs, and like, what would it have been like here? Crumbs, it was damp, because that's one of the things about Bodmin that you don't realise. It's so damp in there, isn't it? There's constant water dropping.
Stone.
Constant water dropping. And I did get, I think I played it to you, the cell behind me that was all blocked off. It was almost like it was behind me on the recorder. I had an acknowledgement that I was sitting there, and then this noise hit, and I know I played you this noise hit my recorder like someone had dropped a stone right in front of me. And it was so loud on the recorder. Because I remember when I was playing it to you, you said, "Did you not hear that?" And I said, "If I'd heard that, you would have heard me saying to the recorder, 'What's that? Who's there?'"
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't hear it. So there was definitely sort of stuff going on, and I think one of the stories that Kirsten told us about that the death row, for want of a better term, the condemned cells, was that when you entered the prison as a new prisoner, you had to walk past them to get to your cell.
Yeah.
And I just think from a mental perspective, from a mental sort of like, this is what's going to happen to you if you do something like that again. I think that was fascinating. But what also happened is when I was at first trying to do a vigil outside those cells, and it was, I think, some of the others were trying to contact some children that they'd heard on the upper floors, and I couldn't get any clean recordings because I could hear them singing nursery rhymes softly, which was, as you say, contaminating it. I went walkabout, and I went to that corridor, the initial sort of admin corridor where the toilets lead off, and there was this noise from behind the partitions, and I heard it with my own ears. I had the recorder going as well, but this noise, and it sounded like either there was clunking, there was an animal trapped in the partition, or there was a machine going on the other side, or something along those lines. And I stood and listened to it for a good couple of minutes and couldn't work out what it was. And I know I went back, and I know I told you about this as well. And I went back and I spoke to Kirsten, and she said, "Well, nothing can be in that partition. There's only like half an inch gap. It's the coffee shops on the other side, and there's no machinery on. Are you sure you didn't hear the ice machine going?"
That's right. And that's close to where we heard footsteps. We heard them, though, from beneath that room.
Ah.
So in other words, we were beneath that room, which if you think about the way the jail's laid out, the back of the break room where we set up, there is a storage closet like at the back there.
Yeah.
Well, if you stand at the back of that room near the storage closet, directly above you is that part of the jail where you heard that noise. So,
okay.
And sure, we heard footsteps, like pacing back and forth. We have them recorded. It was very
this
cool.
wasn't footsteps, and when she unlocked it so we could go back into the canteen, the coffee shop area, the cafe area, and she said, "See, that's where that partition is. There's nothing," and there was nothing there that could have caused that kind of noise, and it wasn't the ice machine I heard, because we set that off, and that wasn't the noise I heard. When I played the recording back to her, she said, "If you listen carefully, you can hear a voice. It sounds to me like it's gates locking and unlocking, like clunk, 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 clunk." And I've pulled it up in the mix listening to it at home, and I can hear like general conversation going on and like a clunk, clunk, clunk. Now, what Kirsten's theory was, it could have been not something interactive, almost like a residual energy that we'd triggered by doing that mock execution. We'd almost triggered a playback of people being let in and out of the gates, and the clunking noises and the conversation. But what was weird is I heard it with my own ears, and I genuinely thought there was an animal trapped in there, or it was a machine going, but it wasn't. And I know we're going to get, we will be sharing, we're sending our recordings through to you, but I know I played you this one as well, but Kirsten actually said that is a noise she has never ever heard in that building, and she's there every day, isn't she?
Yeah, she's kind of the. Well, she's not kind of the expert. She's the expert.
She is the expert.
She knows that building in all weathers. She knows how it behaves in the day, at night when it's cooling down.
Yeah.
So she's a terrific resource, and can't thank her enough.
No, definitely.
For being our guide and for having us as her guests. It was really appreciated.
And the time she took, I know I was plaguing her with history questions, and the time she took explaining things to me, taking me outside, showing me what the layout would have looked like, talking through things, and no question was too much trouble for her. And she was amazing. I'd say as a resource, I found her absolutely amazing. But that was a weird experience that I had, but to have that, hear it with my own ears. But it was weird that when she when she let me into the cafe, I kind of thought I could see some people sitting in the corner, and she was in front of me, so she didn't see me sort of turn my head to think, is there some people sitting over there? A sort of shape of people in the shadows. And she just, as we came out, she went, oh, they're back in the corner again. I was like, what? And she went, they're always sitting in the corner watching us. And I'd sensed that too. It was very, it seemed to be more on the second night but then it seemed to go cold on the second night after all of a sudden. It seemed to ramp up, and then maybe it was because I left early. I didn't see the end of it, but it, yeah, it's an interesting place though.
It is, and I kind of fell in love with it, which is odd. I have this habit of falling in love with like old abandoned buildings, hospitals, Asylum 49 is one I talk about quite often. But there's some kind of weird pull that Bodmin Jail has. Not to everybody. I know some people don't like the atmosphere there and won't go back, but for me, I can just envision myself going back regularly and doing research there for years because there are so many stories to tell.
Yeah. I would like to stay in it when it's a hotel. I would like to stay there. I would
totally do that.
And I've already told the husband we'll be staying there when it's a hotel. I will just make sure I do lots of guard protection stuff on myself because I did get affected. Not great there. But I'd love to stay there when it's a hotel. Because I know that, you guys stayed at Jamaica Inn, didn't you, when you were visiting? And you had, I think, your wife had stuff going on in the room that she picked up.
That's right. Although, I mean, to be fair to us, we and I love the Jamaica Inn. It's one of my favorite pubs.
Lovely vibe to it, isn't it?
There is, and a big shout out to all the nice people there. Alan, the owner, Sammy, Colin, and Kareem that do the paranormal events there. All great people. And we asked deliberately for one of the oldest historic rooms. There's a newer wing, which, still interestingly enough has some activity. Yeah. I've heard stories of the taps turning themselves off and on, various things like that. But most of the paranormal activity takes place in the original part, the oldest part. Go figure. While we were investigating at Bodmin, Laura did not come with us to investigate. My wife, she found herself touched on the foot quite distinctly in that room. And then Gaynor, one of my fellow investigators from Bodmin, came back and woke up to find the bed shaking.
Did she? She didn't tell me that.
Yeah, and after it gave me the potential for a whole bunch of juvenile jokes.
Well, yeah.
She very seriously maintained, no, this absolutely happened, and I have no good explanation for it.
Interesting. No, she didn't mention that. I'll have to ask her about that when she gets back off her holiday she's on at the moment. But yeah, Jamaica Inn, bloody good pies at Jamaica Inn, I must admit. Good
everything.
That pie I had there when that night was lovely.
You get a chance to go, and
you definitely.
The ghosts are just a bonus.
Well, yeah, it's just got a lovely atmosphere, and like you say, the staff are absolutely lovely, and it's a really nice place. And so with Bodmin Jail, it affected me in a way I didn't expect it would. I've never been affected like that before by a place, but I do want to go back there when it's a hotel and stay there and see if I can.
I want to know how it's changing the dynamic there. How is it going to affect the activity?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it right now, people do come to the jail on events. They do movie nights and they do wrestling events sometimes and they do tours, but there's nobody actually staying there 24/7 around the clock. When that changes, when you have this ready supply of energy on tap.
That's a good point, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see this, we see haunted hotels the world over. I don't think I've ever heard of one. I could be mistaken, I'm racking my brains, but which won't take long. But I don't think I've heard of one that was, a jail like that has been converted into a hotel. So you're bringing all that haunted history with you for the ride.
Yeah.
Most hotels, very fond memories, right? You look at haunted hotels, most of them, people were very happy there.
Yes.
Stanley is a prime example.
Yeah.
But it would be very much the opposite at Bodmin. You've got all this unpleasantness. You've got all this darkness, and that's what you're building on. I can't wait, personally, to see what the guests start experiencing.
Well, I did, when I read that it was turning into a hotel, I did think it's going to be, you're going to have a certain type of person who wants to stay there.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine everyone will want to stay. It's not going to be your businessman's retreat, you know. It's going to have a specialist audience, I would have thought. But then again, people get married there. People choose to get married there. So,
and I don't think the atmosphere there, I mean, for me personally, I don't feel the atmosphere there is negative. At least I haven't sensed that. You know, of course, that's not really saying much.
I didn't sense it negative so much. It was more just a general feeling of, what's the point? But and I'm wondering if that's why I became so down afterwards, because I know we were talking about this before we start recording. I wondered if I was picking up on that, what's the point, emotion that I felt almost the minute I started walking around there at night, which would be a logical thing to feel, isn't it, in a sort of prison that was built in 1779. But I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel like I was going to get jumped or something. I just felt very, very, what's the point? That's exactly how I felt.
Well, and I think you can never discount the psychological factor. You can never discount the fact that you are in a place you've been told is haunted, and indeed it is. You are in a place that it looks gloom and doom because it's a jail. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
So just walking in the doors, unless you know, even if you know absolutely nothing else about the environment, you're predisposed, I think, to those kind of feelings, aren't you?
Yeah.
One thing that kind of struck me as funny was that the first year I investigated, I didn't hire a car. I did this year. We used taxis, you know, and every single cab driver, there were 4 of them, every single cab driver is like, where you going, mate? Bodmin Jail, or, oh, you're coming from the jail, or let me tell you about this experience I had there. And all of them had a Bodmin Jail ghost story. Yeah. Like, you know, they'd visited, oh, my dog wouldn't go into this part of the jail, its hackles went, that kind of stuff. So the stories about the place are ubiquitous. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely entrenched in Cornish, not folklore, that's the wrong word, but it's definitely part of their DNA.
It's part of the fabric of Cornwall, isn't it? And I love Cornwall. I adore the place. In my ideal world, I'd like to spend a third of my year living there. That's kind of my long-term plan. Yeah. You know, there's something truly magical about Cornwall.
Yes.
And you talked about this in your show with Richard, I know, I found myself nodding very vigorously. The Cornish are very in touch with their ghosts. The Cornish are very in touch with the kind of the night side of nature, if you will. And I think things happen in Cornwall of a stranger nature that people don't bat an eyelid when you tell them, you know, when those experiences come up.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't get that same thing in the rest of the country, from what I've seen.
Not as much. No, I agree. There is something almost fantastical about Cornwall, definitely.
Yeah. I do use the word magical. I think it fits.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. So when are we hoping for the book to come out? Is it around my birthday?
Right now, I just finished the manuscript for the Farrar school book with E. Benson. That's in his capable hands right now. And I'm finishing up 2 others. One is the Farnsworth House book for Gettysburg, and a second volume of Haunted Healthcare. Then my plan is to have the Bodmin book out by this summer. So I would say probably early July.
Well, I'm the 26th of July, so there you go.
I suspect it'll be in your hands by then, or at least digitally. The digital book always comes out a month sooner than the print book, just because of formatting and all those kind of things.
Well, you know, I want a hard copy. I want a signed hard copy of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's only fair.
My policy has always been that if anybody is in my book, if anybody is part of the story, then that they get a free signed copy. So.
Well, I think I'm writing the foreword, aren't I?
Yeah, we know you are, but you're also in it.
True. I
mean, so either way, it's going to get you a copy pen. And you are right. You are right in the forward, which I couldn't think of anyone that I would rather have do it.
Bless you.
It's fair to say that you badgered me last year when you heard I was going to Bodmin, right? You badgered me to come along.
I think we remember that a bit differently, but all right, I'll take you on that one.
When's Bodmin? No, seriously, when's Bodmin?
That was because I need to plan childcare and everything else, mate.
And I was real pleased to have you along because I like people that are passionate about haunted places,
Yeah.
And you were obviously very passionate about that one.
Yes.
Because you hadn't asked me about going to any of the other British places I've been. So it was great to have you along, and you've had your own unique experiences at the jail.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I thought you would be absolutely perfect to write forward to that book.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you never know what we might investigate together next.
You don't, indeed. And whatever it is, the cover will be you and I kind of back-to-back squatting in a doorway.
Oh, you're never going to let me live that one down, are you?
Nope.
I don't think you got a photo of me squatting in a doorway at Bodmin, though, did you? You didn't
The
get the
Photoshop's
camera
a
on
wonderful
time.
thing.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Richard.
I love coming on this show. It's so much fun.
We'll be talking again soon. I think we've got Cripple Creek penciled in to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. That's another book that I have to finish.
And then I'll be talking to Eric about Farrar.
You know what you should do for Cripple Creek, Pen? Is you should get Wes on.
True. This is going to sound really bad. I'll have both of you.
Yeah.
I can say that to you, but if I said that to Wes, that would not. Yeah.
It's time for a Sid James laugh, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yes, I'll have both of you. I'm a big girl. I can cope. Anyway, as always, Rich, it's been a pleasure and not a chore. Anyone who's enjoyed listening to actually, we could have talked for another hour about what happened at least another hour about what happened at Bodmin. Even then, we've gone over our allocated time, but never mind. I'm sure you all enjoyed listening to our tales of Bodmin Jail. There's so much more that's going to be in the book, and we haven't even talked about some of the names of people who people like Selena Wadge and all of those who are synonymous with the prison. But if you want to catch up with what Richard's up to, he has got his own Facebook page. As he said, he's going to be on the next series of haunted hospitals. You got Paranormal 911. Is that the right name?
Yep.
Paranormal 911.
I don't think it is. It's not made it to the UK yet, has it?
I don't think so. I think you can get it on YouTube, if I remember rightly. But no, it's not. It's not had a broadcast date here yet. You've also got your what do they call yours? Haunted Case Files.
Haunted Case Files. It's called Paranormal Investigators in the UK, and
which
I know
we have got because I've been recording it all, so I can binge watch it all. So if you want to catch him on any of those, do say he's normally pretty receptive to sending him a message. Although once you get to know him, the replies back get sarkier and sarkier. You just got to make sure you give as good as you get. Hey, is that right, Rich?
Absolutely, Penny.
Anyway, on that note, before I get told off by the boss for running over time, it's been me, Penny G. Morgan, talking to you on Haunted Histories, courtesy of Parasearch Radio. Don't forget, it's the PSH radio show tomorrow night, so don't miss out on that one. If you do want to listen to any of our old shows, just head on over to YouTube and you'll find them all over there. But until next week, my lovelies, thank you ever so much for listening. Have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.